How's it going, everyone? Mike the Warhost here, and we're kicking off this year's Spooktober with a look at one of the first posses released at the start of Warcradle's reign, the Absolute Power Posse. An offshoot of the European Dark Council representing their interest in the New World, the Absolute Power Posse is led by the enigmatic Third Man, who is constantly hunting for the missing Hex Shard stolen by Burson Carpathian and the secret source of his RJ-1027 Wonder Fuel. Gathering together a motley collection of society's outcasts, the members of the Absolute Power Posse work in the shadows to further the goals of the Hex and fight back against the hated Order of the All-Shard. For reference, we will be using Stat Card version 3.04c and Handbook version 3.04b for today's discussion. The Posse bonus for Absolute Power is something not to be taken lightly. Each member with the Dark Council special rule gets a +1 range bonus for every unit with the Dark Council special rule. On top of that, any enemy unit targeted with the Dark Council special rule gets a -1 penalty to their mind check for every unit with the Dark Council special rule. This rule becomes more dangerous depending on your opponent's force and the number of tainted units present. You're obviously going to get more mileage out of this bonus if you're squaring up against an enlightened or outlaw force rather than an order force, so plan accordingly. The Absolute Power box contains 7 models and comes in at 83 points. In this box you get the Third Man, Megan Wild, Garrett Morden, John Hunter Bennett, Creature, Maria Torres Villa, and a Hexalith. The Hexalith is free and comes with every Hex posse and your total force part of the handbook. Third Man is your posse boss, and he's a surprisingly tough and dangerous old man. Embrace the Hex gives you the chance to give nearby units the Tainted trait. Fate Weaver gives you some deck manipulation shenanigans. Impervious lets you ignore not only fatal attacks but all negative piercing modifiers. Leech Ability gives you the opportunity to boost an attribute after killing an enemy model. Note of Power restores your fortune pool at the end of the round, and Shrouded forces a reroll on successful aim checks against you. The star of this show, however, is Dark Council. This lets you target a tainted unit, friend or foe, and gives you the chance to compel them to take a single free action. Since it is a free action, it can't be focused or utilize any fortune. The base range for this ability is 7 inches, but that goes up depending on how many units with this rule are in your posse. The Third Man comes with 3 short-range attacks that can ruin your day if you're not ready. Hexbolt has a piercing of -1 and comes with Shredding Refined, base with lethal on a crit, which is more than likely thanks to high ROA. Necrotic Breath is a special taunt attack with hazardous and fatal on a crit. Shadow Vortex is another special attack that comes with lethal blast and close work, as well as fatal on a crit. Creature is the Third Man's bodyguard and should be kept as close to his charge as possible. Durable helps him shrug off incoming fire. Hardy lets him reroll failed grit checks. Monstrous forces rerolls on successful morale checks for nearby enemy units. And Volatile makes attacking him in melee a risky proposition. Eye for the Soft Parts makes brutal attacks hit that much harder, and Loyal Companion is a bit of a mixed bag. Creature can only use special attacks if he's within 10 inches of the Third Man, but it does let Creature become the initial target of an incoming attack if he's within 5 inches of his charge. Creature comes with 2 melee attacks, both of which are nothing to sneeze at. Swallow Whole is his special attack that comes with both fatal and heavy, as well as a -2 piercing. Heavy Fist is less spectacular, but comes with brutal on a hit and stun on a crit. A note on Swallow Whole. Since it has the heavy quality, Creature will either need to stay still during its activation or spend an additional action point to ignore it. Something to keep in mind when counting available action points. Megan Wild is the Third Man's sidekick and one of the 2 sources of portals in this posse. She has the nearly ubiquitous Dark Council rule, so important to this posse. She also has Headhunter for additional fortune after killing a model with the unique trait, Mutual Destruction to make melee attacks a risky proposition, Portal Mastery to create and destroy portals, Rejuvenate to fill nearby units' fortune pools, and Underboss lets you use Megan as a boss instead of a face in a faction posse if needed. If she goes this route, Megan gains 2 fortune and the largesse rule. Pay attention to this rule, it'll come in handy later. Megan comes with 3 attacks to choose from. She has the same Hexbolt that the Third Man does, as well as the Tenebrous Shroud blast attack and a Fellblade that comes with brutal and attuned, as well as fatal on a crit. Megan is no joke on the field and should be considered a major threat. Garrett Morden epitomizes the sneaky strike from the shadows aspect of the Hex. As well as Dark Council, he comes with Commanding Presence, which lets nearby units use his fortune if needed, and Step from the Shadows lets him move into base contact with any piece of terrain within 2d10 plus his mind value in inches. Be warned though, if both dice show up with the same number, Garrett becomes stunned after he arrives. The Garrett comes with the same Hex Bolt and Tenebrous Shroud that Megan Wild has, as well as a basic melee attack if someone gets close enough to charge. John Hunter Bennett is a professional soldier for the Union, and his toolbox shows his martial prowess. As well as Dark Council, he comes with Elite to exchange less than useful adventure cards for action points, Form Up on Me to help get nearby hands or troops in position quicker, Quick Draw to shoot a second time for a single action point instead of 2, Stone Cold Killer for free action points for killing enemy models, and Sicken to have a nearby K9 Automata unit activate immediately once John is done for the turn. An interesting note is that John Hunter Bennett can also be used in a Union detachment, highlighting the extent of the Hex's infiltration within the nation. He comes with an Electro Carbine that has shock on a crit, a blade with refined and an additional -1 piercing on a crit, and a sidearm with close work and -2 piercing. Nothing too fancy, but John is more of a force multiplier when used in conjunction with a hands unit or two. Maria Torres Villa is the second source of portals in this posse, as well as some sneakiness. She comes with Dark Council as well as Dying Breath to get one last swing in before dying. Favor the Bold to get some fortune if she wipes out the last model in a unit. Immune to Pain to ignore the hazard condition as well as the first point of piercing on most attacks. Portal Mastery to create and destroy portals. And Undercover lets Maria stay in reserve at the beginning of the game and come on practically anywhere. This is a great way to be sneaky and open a portal to your opponent's rear for the rest of your force to use. Her weapons aren't much to write home about. Her throwing knives have a -1 piercing on a crit, her sidearm has close work and -2 piercing on a crit, and her Vortex Glove is a special attack with a -2 piercing and lethal on a crit. While the glove looks like an impressive weapon, Maria should only really be used for portal shenanigans. So now that you know what you get in the posse box, what's the best way to put together a tournament-ready list? You have 67 points left over to fill out this posse and add another if you use everything in the posse box. You'll only have a single slot left to fill before it's time to look for a second posse. Unfortunately, you won't be able to add another Dark Council unit to this list, however, as all the other units with access to this rule won't fit in the remaining slot. I'd recommend avoiding any K9 units for this slot, since none of them are tainted. They won't be affected by Dark Council. If it were up to me, I'd get Ignatius Nero from the Only God Forgives posse to fill in that last slot. He comes with a lot of nasty tricks and can be easily compelled with Dark Council. Going that route will bump your list up to an even 100, leaving you with an extra 50 points to play with. What do you do with that remaining 50 points? There are a few interesting ideas with this. One possibility is to add some additional mobility with a small Quantrill's Raiders detachment. Taking William Quantrill, a pair of Bandit Outriders, and Georgia Maddox will get you right to the 150 point mark, as well as a trio of tainted units with a quickness nearly double that of everyone else in the force. If you want to bring along some hands to make use of some of the abilities that the Dark Council posse has, however, it'll take some finagling. First off, you're going to want to take Megan Wild out of the Absolute Power posse. Granted, this will affect the range and debuff her Dark Council attempt, but just follow me for a second. You're going to move Megan Wild in the boss slot of a generic faction posse. Since the underboss rule comes with a 3-point increase, this brings your list to 103 points. From here, you'll add a unit of 5 Hex Cutthroats and 5 Hex Gunmen to babysit objectives, and a pair of Bandit Outriders as a rapid reaction unit. This will bring you to 149 points. If you're really interested in adding as many bodies as possible, you can even drop Ignatius from the Absolute Power posse and free up enough points for an additional Outrider, Cutthroat, and Gunman unit. I'm not sure going that route is really worth it though. One of the benefits of this list, and with it a Hex Force overall, is the amount of flexibility you have. While not as prevalent as the Outlaws, there are plenty of other posses and detachments willing to work with this less than savory faction, so take a good look at the options first before parting with any of your hard-earned hobby dollars. The big trick to utilizing this posse is leveraging the tricks in your unit's toolboxes. If you have a second Hex posse along, try to put your Hex list near critical areas. Take full advantage of having 2 units with Portal Mastery to quickly move across the board to key areas. Try not to get into a standout fight if you can. Hex loves to fight as dirty as possible, whenever possible. Well, that's going to do it for me today. Stay tuned for more Wild West Exodus, Mythos, Fog and Friction, and Dystopian Wars content in the near future, as well as some looks at Lost World Exodus in the not so near future. Maybe. At some point. Please? Alright, take care everyone.